Hi everyone, my name is Amie Kaufman. I'm an author of books for children, young adults, and more discerning adults. I write a lot of fantasy and a lot of science fiction. I like escaping from our world. Yes, it was a busy pandemic for me. I released 4 books and a novella into this pandemic. So it was a strange experience not seeing them on bookshelves for a while, sort of knowing they were out there, but, not knowing that they were out there at all. So my most recent ones are The World Between Blinks. So this one is for younger readers, sort of 8 to 12, but it's also a really fun one for families to read together. It's about a couple of cousins who slip away Narnia style into a world not our own, and it's a world populated by everything that's ever been lost from here. Big things like Amelia Earhart, or whole lost cities, right down to the homework that was definitely in your bag. It doesn't seem to be there anymore. And the one thing they can't seem to find in this world is the guy who has the power to send them home again. So it's a real history nerd book, and I'm a real history nerd, so this was enormous fun. And my most recent YA book was The Other Side of the Sky. So it's a book about a prince from a science fiction city in the sky who falls to a land below that's ruled by magic and prophecy, and he meets a living goddess there and discovers that he's a part of one of her prophecies. I would say this one is about 12 and up, and it's very much one of the goals with this book was to write a book where the whole way through, not just the characters but the reader was debating, is this a sci-fi book or is this a fantasy book? And every time you think you're sure, we're going to change your mind. So in the young adult world, I've worked with Jay Kristoff a few times. So we wrote the Illuminae files together, and we wrote the Aurora cycle. So book 3 of that's coming at the end of the year. That's definitely my most frequently asked question at the moment. And with Meg Spooner, who I wrote The Other Side of the Sky with, I've also written the Starbound trilogy, which starts with These Broken Stars, and we wrote the Unearthed duology as well. So piles of them. And then on my own, I've done my middle grade, so I wrote the Elemental series, which is Ice Wolves, Scorched Dragons, and Battleborn. I write because it's who I am, because it's what I do, and I would be doing it whether anyone was publishing it or not. My earliest known storytelling incident was in grade 2 when I told my entire class that one of the gum trees in our playground was the magic faraway tree, and that I had adventures up it every night. So, I've always told stories. I always will tell stories. When I have downtime, I just tell more stories. It's in me. It's what I am. I'm incredibly lucky. I've been a full-time writer for 7 years now. So I get up in the morning and it's what I do. That's one of the reasons I managed to write so many books, this is my job. Usually it involves a lot more international travel and touring than it has in recent times. So it's been very much just me in my little office at the bottom of the garden. It's funny because I think at the beginning of COVID, I think almost every writer I know said, we've got this. We already stay home all day. We already never get out of our PJs. We already like working away from everybody else. We've been training for this all our lives. Stand aside. And then, of course, it turns out that overwhelming and ongoing existential dread's actually really bad for creativity, and we weren't prepared at all. So I think I found it really hard to write in 2020. I still did. It's my job. So I found ways to sort of, to reframe it in my head. And instead of thinking I have to do this, I would think I get to do this. I get to leave all of my stresses and go into this fantasy world for a little while. And, I'm lucky to get to do it. So I would take myself away and do it. But I do like to talk about how hard it was, because I speak to a lot of writers who are, earlier on their writing journey and who maybe don't have a community around them or aren't published yet. And they found it really hard and they think they're the only ones. And so I think it's really helpful to say, actually, I'm one of the most prolific writers in my field. I'm a professional. I do this for a living. And I've been speaking to all my mates who do the same. And geez, we've all found it really, really hard. So, if you're an aspiring writer and you have found it hard, go easy on yourself. It's okay. It'll come back. It's actually really hard to write when you've got this many questions in your mind. Yeah, I mean, usually, because it's a very solo job, right? So, you just sit there by yourself all day. And for some people that's a dream, but for me, I actually really like talking to other people, both about my writing and in general. So I usually work one day a week, here in Melbourne. I go into the State Library with a bunch of other authors, and we just sit there silently together writing, but then we go for lunch and, sometimes we brainstorm in the afternoon. So I think that I really missed that. So it was a lot of Slack channels and, having an online workspace where we could sort of chat with each other all day. A lot of Zoom calls. Even though we were all Zoomed out, it was still important to see our friends' faces, and both to talk about the work, but also to talk about not the work. So yeah, we tried to find ways to support each other, and a lot of my colleagues are in the US and are in the UK and are still very much in lockdown. So, even as we start to move out into the world again, I'm trying to make sure that I stay in touch with them and, offer them the support that we needed during that time, because it was rough. My reading was interesting in 2020. There were times when I found it really difficult to read, and there were times when it was all I wanted to do. But I was definitely looking for books that were, we use the word a lot, but that were unputdownable. I was looking for books that really helped me escape. And one that I read that I absolutely loved was called the Eurasia Initiative by Lilly Wilkinson, who's an Australian YA author. And the premise of the book is that a bunch of people wake up on a self-driving bus and it's doing laps of this island, and none of them have any memory of who they are. And they start receiving questions to answer. And at first, they're answering them without really knowing why, and then it becomes apparent quite quickly that the stakes of this game are very, very high. So it was... Oh gosh, I just, one, I couldn't put it down, and two, I didn't see the end coming, and then I got really mad at myself because, I had every piece I needed and I didn't put it together. So I thought it was just masterfully written. Loved it. Oh gosh, look, I mean, I've always been a reader. A lot of my early memories are of reading. When I had a bad day or I was sick, my dad would take me down to my local bookshop and he would buy me a Babysitter's Club book because I loved those. But the first book I remember feeling was really, really special was The Dark is Rising by Susan Cooper. And, which is a book about a boy in our world who discovers that there's magic in our world. And it was when I was in grade 6, my primary school librarian, Mrs. Amie, told me that it was her desert island book. And I was, what's a desert island book? And she said, well, if you were shipwrecked, it's the one book that you would take away with you. And I remember thinking, wow, imagine a book so good that, you could have only that book and it would be okay. And so a couple of weeks later, I got my first ever gift voucher for my local bookshop, which is still my local bookshop today. And I took it down, and on sale for $19.99 was the omnibus edition of all 5 books in that series. And it took me until I was, almost this old to realise I don't think that omnibus edition was $19.99, even all those years ago. I don't think it was a coincidence that it cost exactly what I had, but I didn't know that at the time because I didn't understand money. So I handed over my book voucher and I came home with my omnibus, and I still read The Dark is Rising every Christmas, and it still feels magical to me. And I still drop off a copy of each of my new finished books for my primary school librarian, and I still invite her to my book launches. Oh, what's next for me? I've just handed in the draft of the sequel to The World Between Blinks, so I'm going to be getting down to work editing that. The next books that will be out from me will be the 3rd book in the Aurora Rising series, which is coming out towards the end of the year. And we get to share the cover and the title for that really soon, which I'm really looking forward to. And then after that will come sequel to The World Between Blinks, and will come the sequel to The Other Side of the Sky. So it's going to be, I've got, 3 coming in the next year, but I get a nice big chunk in the middle of the year for 2021 where I haven't got anything coming out, and I'm just going to close my office door. Oh, thanks for having me. It's so nice to be back in a bookshop. It's great.